Hey everyone, my name's Olivia, I'm 47, and this is one of the wildest stories I've ever lived through. I still don't know how I feel about it, but I can't stop thinking about what happened. I want to share it, not because I'm proud of it, far from it, but because life can surprise you in ways you never see coming. It happened on my farm, late one night with my nephew. The stars were out, the air was cool, and it felt like any other evening. But it wasn't. My nephew Carl was visiting from across the country, and what started as just two old friends catching up turned into something I never expected. It was a night that changed everything. So here's the background. My young nephew Carl, who had just turned 19, decided to come visit me all the way from the other side of the country. We hadn't seen each other in about 4 years. Last time I saw him, he was this lanky teenager, a little shy, always polite. But when he showed up at my farm that day, I barely recognized him. He had changed a lot. He was tall, fit, with these bright eyes and a confident smile. His curly hair had grown out a bit, and he carried himself in a way that felt different. Mature, I guess. I didn't want to stare, but I caught myself doing it more than once, especially when he was unpacking his stuff and changing out of his travel clothes. You know how sometimes your mind just drifts. I'd shake off those thoughts as soon as they popped up. I mean, he was a friend, practically family. But those thoughts have a way of lingering, even when you don't want them to. If only I'd known what was going to happen next. It's one of those things that hits you like a ton of bricks. You don't see it coming, and suddenly, everything shifts. Trust me, you're going to be blown away when you hear what unfolded. So, one evening, Carl and I decided to sit out on the porch. The sun had just set, and the sky had that deep purple hue that makes everything feel calm. We cracked open a couple of bottles of cider. Nothing too strong, just something to take the edge off, and had some snacks. We started talking about life, just catching up on everything that had happened over the years. Carl was smart, much wiser than his years. He talked about his studies, his plans, and then, out of nowhere, he mentioned his ex-girlfriend. They had broken up recently, and it was clear the wound was still fresh. He said it had been a painful breakup, one of those that leaves you questioning everything. I could see the hurt in his eyes, and it struck a chord with me. I'd been there too many times myself. I sat next to him, and without even thinking, I pulled him into a hug. It was just meant to be comforting, like when you hug someone who's going through a rough time. I told him he was young and had his whole life ahead of him. You deserve to be whoever you want to be, I said. He looked at me, and there was something in his eyes I hadn't noticed before. This intensity, like he was trying to figure something out. And then, before I could process what was happening, he leaned in and kissed me. It wasn't just a peck on the lips. It was deep, passionate, and there was a tenderness to it that caught me completely off guard. For a second, I froze. My mind was racing. This was Carl, my friend. Someone I'd known since he was practically a kid. But in that moment, all those thoughts faded into the background. There was this magnetic pull, something I couldn't resist. We kept kissing, and everything around us seemed to disappear. I can't even fully explain it. I was caught in this whirlwind of emotions and sensations. Part of me knew it was probably the cider, the late hour, the vulnerability of the conversation. But another part of me didn't care. It felt like we were both floating in this strange, unexpected connection. I remember his hands, gentle but firm, like he was afraid of breaking some invisible line. And my own hands. They were exploring, learning. It felt electric, like touching a live wire, but in the best way possible. Our breathing got heavier, and the world seemed to narrow down to just the two of us. I still don't fully understand what led to that moment. Maybe it was the loneliness we had both been carrying. Maybe it was the cider talking. Or maybe, deep down, we had been heading toward this all along, and neither of us had realized it. All I know is that, in that moment, nothing else mattered. It was just us, caught in something we couldn't stop, and maybe didn't want to. After that kiss, everything felt like a blur. I didn't think, I just felt. We made our way inside, barely breaking apart, and ended up in the living room. The fire in the fireplace was still crackling, casting this soft, warm glow around the room. I remember the way the light danced in Carl's eyes. There was this mix of curiosity and something deeper, something I couldn't quite put into words. We sat down on the couch, still close, and it felt like we were moving through some kind of dream. Our kisses became slower, more deliberate. There was a tenderness in the way he touched me, like he was afraid to rush anything. His hand moved to my cheek, and his thumb brushed my skin softly, as if he was memorizing every detail. I pulled back for a second, trying to catch my breath, trying to ground myself. "Are you sure about this?" I whispered, more to myself than to him. He didn't say anything at first. Instead, he leaned his forehead against mine, and we stayed like that for a moment, just breathing together. Finally, he nodded, his eyes searching mine for any hesitation. There wasn't any. What happened next wasn't rushed or hurried. It was slow, gentle, like we were both discovering something for the first time. Our hands explored, learning the contours of each other's bodies. I ran my fingers through his curls, feeling the softness, and he sighed, this quiet, content sound that made my heart ache in the best way. I remember the way his hands moved. Tentative at first, like he was testing the waters, then more confident. He traced patterns on my back, down my arms, sending shivers through me. Every touch felt electric, like we were sharing a secret no one else in the world knew. I ended up straddling him, my hands resting on his shoulders. He looked up at me with this mix of wonder and vulnerability that made my breath catch. I leaned down, our lips meeting again, and this time it felt different. More intense, deeper. His hands settled on my waist, holding me close but not pulling, just being present. Our movements were slow, deliberate. It wasn't about rushing to some destination. It was about being in the moment, feeling every second. Our kisses were soft but passionate, each one a little longer than the last. I could feel his heartbeat through his chest, steady and strong, and it felt like it was in sync with mine. I found myself moving closer to him, my hands gently tracing his chest. There was something comforting in the way his skin felt beneath my touch, strong, warm, and steady. His breathing deepened slightly as I leaned in, pressing a soft kiss to his chest, feeling the rise and fall of his breath with each motion. It wasn't hurried, it wasn't frantic. It was slow, deliberate, and full of care. As I moved lower, my hands instinctively held onto him, finding a steady rhythm in the connection we were building. It wasn't just physical, it was something more. His hands gently found my hair, fingers threading through my wavy silver strands, as if grounding himself in the moment. It was as though the touch alone was enough to communicate everything we were feeling. Comfort, tenderness, something more than either of us had expected. I could feel his legs against mine, his hands guiding me gently as I rested beside him. There was something soothing in the way we both allowed the quiet moments to unfold, each of us moving with intention, trying to fully appreciate the closeness that had developed between us. It wasn't something planned. I wasn't thinking about anything, what had happened earlier, what I had to do later. It was all just gone. It was just the two of us, and everything else felt so distant, almost like background noise that didn't even matter anymore. I climbed on top of him, and it just felt right. There was nothing awkward or rushed about it. His hands naturally found their place on my hips, firm but gentle, like he was both holding me steady and telling me without words, "I've got you." I remember the warmth of his palms and how they seemed to match the rhythm of everything else. It was grounding, like he wasn't just touching me, but keeping me in the moment. And as I leaned closer, I buried my hands in his hair, feeling the soft texture between my fingers. It was comforting in a way I didn't expect, like holding onto something real and alive. For a moment, we didn't speak. There wasn't any need to. His breath was steady, warm against my neck, and I could feel the tension in both of us dissolve, like this was where we were supposed to be. It wasn't wild or overly intense. It was just natural. It hit me all at once how much I wanted him to take control. I don't even know when the shift happened. It wasn't like a conscious thought, more like this instinctive pull. I just let myself relax, leaned back a little, and waited. He moved above me, and immediately I could feel the difference. His body, so close, radiated this warmth that was impossible to ignore. And then there was the way he looked at me, steady, intense, but not in a way that made me feel small. It was the opposite, like he was fully present, fully aware of me, and it sent this wave through me that I wasn't ready for. When he hovered over me, the space between us felt charged. I could feel the weight of his presence before he even touched me. And then slowly he leaned in. I remember the first brush of his lips against my neck, and it was like my whole body woke up in a way I hadn't felt in so long. I'm 47, and honestly, I'd almost forgotten what this level of connection and energy could feel like. There was a strength in him, not just physical, but something deeper, like this quiet confidence that made it so easy for me to just let go. I wasn't thinking about anything. No second guessing, no overanalyzing. I just let myself feel everything. The warmth of his breath, the way his hands slid around my sides, pulling me closer, like he wanted to make sure I knew I wasn't going anywhere. When he kissed my neck again, something in me shifted. I don't know how else to describe it other than like this huge release. I pressed him closer to me, not even realizing how tightly I was holding on to him, until I felt his body against mine, firm and solid. And that's when it really hit me. This wasn't just another moment. This was something I hadn't felt in years. It was the kind of closeness that I'd missed without even realizing how much I missed it. His warmth, his strength, his presence. It all came together so naturally that it felt like the most obvious thing in the world. I'm not gonna lie. There was a split second where I almost lost it, like I could have cried or laughed or done both at the same time. Not from sadness or nerves, but from the sheer weight of realizing this is actually happening. It was overwhelming in the best way, like every wall I didn't even know I'd built had just crumbled. As he stayed there, kissing me, holding me, it wasn't rushed or frantic. It was deliberate, like he wanted to make sure I felt everything he was giving me. And I did. Every touch, every kiss, every look, it all added up to something so much bigger than just two people in a moment. It felt raw, real, and completely alive. That warmth, that strength, I don't know how to describe it without sounding dramatic, but it wasn't just physical. It was like he was pouring all of himself into the moment, and I couldn't help but meet him there. And honestly, that was the part that stayed with me, long after it was over. The fact that for the first time in what felt like forever, I felt completely and totally connected in every way that mattered. The next morning, I woke up and immediately felt disoriented. For a moment, I didn't even realize where I was, but then it all hit me like a truck. I was in bed, and so was he. I looked over and saw Carl still sleeping, his face completely calm, totally unaware of the mini panic attack I was having. I didn't know how to feel. Shocked? Embarrassed? Maybe a bit of both. I sat there for a moment, staring at the ceiling, trying to make sense of it. It wasn't like I regretted what happened, not really. but it was the kind of thing you don't expect to wake up to and feel okay about right away. I got out of bed quietly, trying not to wake him, and headed straight for the shower. I needed a minute, or 20, to process everything. As the water hit me, I started replaying the night in my head, every little moment. The way he touched me, how close we were, how natural it felt in the moment. And yet, standing there under the water, I couldn't help but think, what the hell was I doing? It wasn't just the physical part, though yeah, that was definitely part of it. It was the emotional weight of it. Carl and I weren't supposed to cross that line, not in a million years. And yet, we did. I couldn't stop thinking, was it a mistake? The logical side of me kept screaming that it probably was. But deep down, I wasn't so sure. I got out of the shower, got dressed, and went about the day like nothing had happened. When we saw each other, we both played it cool. Neither of us said a word about the night before, and honestly, it was kind of surreal. We were just normal. Like we hadn't just spent the night breaking every unspoken rule between us. The day dragged on. I was constantly replaying everything in my head, trying to make sense of how we'd gotten here, and more importantly, what was going to happen next. But Carl, he acted like nothing was different. It was almost frustrating, but at the same time, I was kind of grateful. I wasn't ready to have the conversation yet, and apparently, neither was he. That night, I went to bed early. My mind was still running a million miles an hour, but I was exhausted. I must have been half asleep when I felt it, the weight of someone sitting on the edge of my bed. For a second, I thought I was dreaming, but then I felt him. Carl slid into bed behind me, his movements slow and deliberate, like he was testing the waters. He pressed his body against mine, wrapping an arm around my waist. His warmth was immediate, and it completely woke me up. My heart was racing, and before I could say anything, he whispered, his voice low and soft, "Last night was the best night of my life." I didn't know what to say. I just froze, caught somewhere between shock and disbelief. But then he continued, "I want more." Before I could even process his words, I felt his hand start to move, slow and steady. It wasn't rushed or forceful. It was like he was waiting for me to stop him. But I didn't. I couldn't. His hand slid lower, and I felt my breath catch. It was so different from the night before, less impulsive, more deliberate, like he wanted to make sure I felt every single moment. I turned slightly, just enough to look at him, and the way he was watching me made my stomach flip. He leaned in, his lips brushing against my neck, and I swear it was like my body responded before my brain even had a chance to catch up. I reached back, my hand finding his, and for a moment, we just stayed like that. Close, connected, with every touch feeling heavier than the last. The moment I felt Carl's hand start to move, I could feel my heart pounding in my chest. It wasn't rushed or frantic. It was slow, deliberate, like he was testing the waters. His fingers slid over the fabric of my shirt at first, almost teasing, before finally finding the edge and slipping underneath. There was something about the way he touched me, so confident, but not aggressive. It felt like he was focused entirely on me, reading my reactions with every movement. His hand rested on my side for a moment, and the warmth of his palm against my skin sent this wave through me that I couldn't quite explain. When his lips brushed against my neck, it was like my entire body reacted at once. I let out this quiet breath I hadn't realized I was holding, and instinctively, I pressed myself back against him. He kissed me there, just below my ear, and I swear it was like the rest of the world completely disappeared. His hand moved again, this time more purposeful, tracing the curve of my side and then lower. It wasn't just the physical sensation that had me reeling. It was the care in how he touched me, like he was making sure I felt every single second. And I did. I turned slightly toward him, and when our eyes met, the look on his face completely undid me. It wasn't just desire. It was deeper than that, like he was trying to tell me something without saying a word. He leaned in, his forehead resting against mine for just a second before his lips found mine. The kiss was slow at first, almost hesitant, but it quickly deepened. His hand moved to my hip, pulling me closer, and I could feel the strength in his grip. Not rough, but firm, like he didn't want to let me go. I found myself responding without even thinking, my hands sliding up to his shoulders, feeling the tension in his muscles as he held me. He shifted slightly, rolling me onto my back so he could lean over me. The weight of him was grounding in a way I hadn't experienced in so long. He kissed me again, his lips trailing from my mouth to my jaw, and then back to my neck. I couldn't stop myself from arching into him, my hands moving to his back and pulling him closer. The intimacy of it was overwhelming, but in the best way. I wasn't just lying there. I was fully present, completely tuned into every little thing he did. And when it was over, when we were lying there in the quiet, his arm draped over me and his breath warm against my skin. I felt this sense of calm that I hadn't felt in years. He didn't let go of me right away, and I didn't want him to. We just stayed like that, tangled up in each other, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like everything was exactly as it should be. And the most intriguing part, it was my nephew. My brother's son. This thought busted and ate me at the same time. When it was all over, I found myself lying on his chest, listening to the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. It was grounding in a way I didn't expect, but also completely surreal. His arm was wrapped around me, and his other hand was gently stroking my hair. He didn't say a word, but he didn't need to. His touch said everything. I closed my eyes for a moment, trying to let it all sink in, but my thoughts were spinning. My nephew. The realization hit me like a wave. This wasn't just anyone. It was Carl, someone I'd known for years. The same Carl who'd been seen from his childhood. The thought drove me crazy. Part of me couldn't believe what had just happened, and yet another part of me was excited. I tried to push that feeling aside, but it lingered, warm and undeniable. This was wrong, wasn't it? Or at least it should have been. But lying there, with him holding me so close, it didn't feel wrong at all. In fact, it felt like the best thing that had ever happened to me. I looked up at him, and he glanced down at me with a soft, almost shy smile. It wasn't like him to look vulnerable, but in that moment he did. I could see it in his eyes. He felt it too. The same mix of disbelief and certainty. "I'm glad you hugged me that night," he finally said, his voice low and quiet, almost like he wasn't sure if he should say it. I didn't know what to say back. I just nodded, resting my head against him again, trying to sort through the million emotions swirling in my chest. It wasn't just about the night, about what had happened between us. It was about the connection, the trust, the way he made me feel like I was the only person in the world who mattered. As his fingers continued to run through my hair, I let myself relax into him. I knew things would be complicated after this. We couldn't just go back to how things were. But for now, I didn't care. For the first time in a long time, I felt completely safe, completely seen, and completely alive. It wasn't just a moment, it was something bigger. Something that I knew would stay with me, no matter what happened next. The day had finally come. I woke up to the soft, early morning light filtering through the curtains, but it didn't feel like a peaceful morning. It felt like the calm before a storm I wasn't sure I was ready for. Carl had to leave. He had his own life, his commitments, and it felt like everything I had built up over the past few days was about to crumble into something I wasn't sure I could deal with. We didn't talk much that morning. I could tell he was also avoiding it, not wanting to acknowledge what had passed between us. I think we both knew that it would be easier if we didn't address it directly, but the tension in the air was thick. The unspoken words were hanging between us like a weight we couldn't shake off. I could feel the knot in my stomach tighten as we ate breakfast, both of us quietly moving around the kitchen, doing our best to act normal. But the quiet was deafening. I didn't want him to go. I didn't want to be alone again. I didn't know how I was going to face the emptiness that would come once he was gone. But I also knew that it wasn't practical, and it was probably better for both of us if we didn't continue down a path we weren't sure we could navigate. The reality was that no one would understand. Our situation, whatever it had been, was complicated. I was older than him, and while there was some undeniable connection, it didn't fit with what the world expected. And Carl had his own life to live. He couldn't stay here forever, and I couldn't make him. So all we had left was this moment, and I wanted to make it count. I walked into the living room after a while, trying to pretend everything was fine, but I could feel the heaviness of the situation all around me. He was packing up his things, getting ready to head back home. I could see the sadness in his eyes, but neither of us said it out loud. Instead, I broke the silence with a suggestion. "Hey," I said, my voice quieter than usual. "Why don't you take a shower before you go? I know you've been on the road a while, and it might help you feel more awake for the drive." He looked up at me, probably a little surprised, but then nodded. "Yeah, I guess that sounds good." We walked to the bathroom together, and I tried not to think too much about the situation. I wasn't sure why I suggested it, but it felt like one last moment, one last chance to be close to him before he left. I couldn't shake the feeling that I didn't want the connection we'd shared to just slip away without some kind of closure, even if it wasn't spoken. I turned on the water and waited for it to warm up, feeling a little awkward, but also strangely calm. Carl stepped under the water first, his shoulders relaxing as the warm stream hit his skin. I followed, and for a moment, it felt like we were back to how things had been the night before. Comfortable, quiet, and just present. I didn't know what to expect, but when I stepped closer to him, I felt the rush of emotions again. The water cascaded down, running over both of us, and for a few moments, it was just the sound of the shower and the soft touches of our hands as we tried to maintain the connection without saying anything. It wasn't about anything else. I was just there, with him, feeling the warmth of the water and the warmth of his body in front of me. I don't think I could have explained it then, and I'm not sure I can now, but there was something simple, something real about that moment. It was like we were just two people, existing together in the quiet, in the safe space we had carved out for ourselves. I found myself on my knees, maybe just out of impulse, not really thinking about anything other than the closeness we shared in that moment. There was no rush. We both knew that the time was coming to an end, but for a brief moment, it didn't matter. I could feel his hand in my hair, guiding me gently, and I realized just how much I had come to care about him in such a short amount of time. The shower felt like a way of holding on to something that was slipping away too fast. It was one last tender moment. I couldn't ignore the emotions running through me, but I also couldn't ignore the fact that he was going, and everything would change once he left. I pressed myself against him, and he pulled me in, holding me close for a long moment under the running water. After Carl left, life felt quieter, emptier. I found myself spending a lot of time alone. I knew I couldn't keep living like this. It wasn't fair to either of us. But at the same time, I couldn't seem to stop myself from replaying those moments over and over, each one bringing a new wave of longing that I didn't know how to deal with. It was like I was trapped in a loop, caught between wanting to let go and not being able to. I couldn't even explain it to anyone. How could I? How could I explain this to anyone who wouldn't understand? It wasn't just about the physical attraction, it was deeper than that. There was an emotional connection that went beyond the surface. It was a bond that I couldn't easily let go of, no matter how hard I tried. I kept telling myself that I needed to move on, that what had happened between Carl and me was a moment. Just that, nothing more. But the truth was, it wasn't that simple. I couldn't just forget. Every time I found myself alone, I couldn't help but think back to those moments we shared. It was almost like I could still feel the warmth of his body, the softness of his touch, the way he held me close when we didn't say anything at all.